Yeah, I've made a mistake, but someone had to do it. Video games are in a weird state at the moment. We've reached this point where a lot of them are being designed to be played for a long period of time. The live service game, the thing you'll hit up every few months and be like, cool, before turning it off and booting up the Netflix flavor of the week. Big hits like Destiny and Fortnite have really paved the way for this to become the new mainstream. But the last year has seen a major shift where some of the highest reviewed and best-selling things have been unconventional single-player experiences, with Elden Ring, Pokemon Arceus, and Horizon Forbidden West dominating the sales chart for 2022. I feel like we're on the edge of another little shift, so where does that leave the modern live service game? Right when I was feeling like the Battle Pass was completely engulfing my entire existence, making its way into Chocobo GP and Final Fantasy XIV, we get an onslaught of new releases that don't do that. Tunic and Tiny Tina's Wonderlands come to mind, things that feel fresh by simply not wanting to eat up every second of your spare time. After all, not every video game needs to do that, right? Well, for some reason, Square Enix thought otherwise. Several of their releases in the last few years have gone for the games as a service model to various levels of success. Yeah, Final Fantasy XIV usually kills, and their new PvP-based Battle Pass actually works pretty well, but not so much to say with like Avengers, the gear-based Outriders, and I'm still confused as to why Chocobo GP needed one. So that brings us to today, yesterday. Babylon's Fall. It's been about 2 months since this extremely notorious video game release, and I think that the world's collective reaction has been meh. When this thing was first announced at E3 2018, I was actually interested, mostly because of this little logo right here, PlatinumGames. So when it finally comes out and you're looking at this, and oh god this, needless to say, what in the world happened? So as we do, I went in, I beat the game 100%, got the plat, finished most of the content I could for a live game, and went as far as I could. There will be more, but sometimes you gotta know when to quit.
So yo, it's Austin, and today we're going to be doing a deep dive into the incredibly controversial Babylon's Fall. We're going to be looking at a timeline of everything, so the expectations before coming out, the game itself, and apparently what's going to be happening in the future. I couldn't really find a review or video that really details the experience of Babylon's Fall as something you play every day, so I did exactly that. Why? Well, because I'm nuts. But before we get into the thick of it, I need to talk to y'all about today's sponsor, Factor. I'm gonna be honest, sometimes I am working so hard that I lose track of time and I don't really have time to prepare myself a decent meal. That is until I found out about Factor. Factor is a delivery meal kit that sends freshly pre-prepared meals straight to your door. And I'm talking the good stuff, like low-calorie, vegetarian, keto, and vegan. They're highly customizable menu choices that come to you ready to heat in the microwave or oven in a jiffy. There's a rotating weekly menu that has usually 25 or more meal options with different add-ons that you can include. There's a lot of flexibility here for someone who doesn't have time to make decisions for himself, like me. Like recently, I've been playing too much Babylon's Fall for this video maybe, so I grabbed myself the creamy poblano chicken, which is one of their really delicious and healthy meals, pop it in, and it's good to go. Cause sometimes you need something quick that isn't a burger that'll have a 50-50 chance of destroying you. Each meal is made of premium ingredients with integrity, and in a market filled with a lot of diet plans, Factor's just a really easy one that works for me. My partner's actually like, hey, why don't you get more of those? Cause she's kind of busy like myself, so I think we're gonna go do that right after this. So if you're wanting to start eating healthy or just need something to help support that busy lifestyle, head on over to go.factor75.com/eruption120 and use the code eruption120 to get $120 off your first purchase. There's some super tasty stuff this week too. That's go.factor75.com/eruption120 to save $120 today. Thank you so much to Factor for the quick tasty meals and sponsor, but for now, it's time to talk about Babylon's Fall. Y'all get ready.
I think I was one of the few people who was actually really pumped for Babylon's Fall. I'm not inherently opposed to the idea of playing a big ol' live service game, as I've been an MMO guy since I was 12, playing like Ragnarok Online and Anarchy Online. The idea of sinking hundreds of hours into an evolving world is pretty cool and something that still captivates to this day. All the players who made Grand Theft Auto Online one of the most successful games ever are all about world building and RP, they'll just never admit it. If you've watched my content before, PlatinumGames needs no introduction. From humble beginnings coming out of the dismantling of Clover Studio with Best Game God Hand, to the rise of Bayonetta, Metal Gear Rising, all the way to the awkward Metal Gears with licensed games. The idea of a quote live PlatinumGames title with RPG elements is something that to me sells itself. I mean, heck, Scalebound was something that everyone was looking forward to, but unfortunately got canceled in January 2017. We'll come back to that later because it's important, but zip ahead to June 11th, 2018, E3. During the Square Enix video conference that showcased Kingdom Hearts 3, Shadow of Tomb Raider, and The Quiet Man, a little trailer for Babylon's Fall was seen. No gameplay, just a cool looking CG and a PNG for a logo and the year 2019. Oh, and a little developed by PlatinumGames. Beyond the fact that there was this giant laser coming out of a dude's back that slapped another dude, this was your typical announcement fluff, but a cool concept nonetheless. Then, silence. There'd be no new news, trailers, or anything on Babylon's Fall until the very end of 2019 when they'd slide a new snippet of gameplay into the state of play. And well, it looked like a typical Platinum game. Launchers, stylish combos, big spectacle action, but with like a little back spirit laser thing. I think for the mainstream audience it was a big whatever, but for the character action audience, I mean, it was the announcement of another Platinum and Square Enix duo project, the group that brought us Nier Automata, which is arguably one of the best either of those two have ever put out. But this time, instead of an announcement date, there was more info in the summer. Then, COVID. More delays, summer 2020 turned into summer 2021, and Square would announce a world premiere showcase with more info coming on the baby fall. But not before posting weird, cryptic tweets with random letters capitalized, spelling out Snillitsen, or an anagram for Sentinels, whatever that means. But then, June 13th, another trailer dropped, and this was the big controversial one. After a showcase of environments and a very, very thick painted looking art style, we were greeted with a brand new segment of gameplay: multiplayer. Live service. This was heated for many, as the core PlatinumGames fanbase wasn't interested in this type of game. They wanted a solid single-player dealio. This, of course, angered the gamers, with many people throwing out wild and ridiculous speculation about what could have happened. The initial trailers didn't have any multiplayer elements, so clearly this was forced upon them. Square Enix was forcing Platinum to make a live service game against their will. That is, of course, completely wrong. According to director Kenji Saito of Metal Gear Rising fame, in an interview with JP Games, Babylon's Fall would, quote, be an online multiplayer live service game, and that there was a misunderstanding as a result of not being able to show off the online multiplayer. So yeah, throw that assumption out the window. Next up, a closed beta, one that came back with the main feedback of please make the graphics less legible. Then finally, a tiny bit before the game came out, a demo that got a lot of negative reception, and lastly, the reviews. Oh god, the reviews. As of today, Babylon's Fall is the lowest reviewed game on the PlayStation 5 according to Metacritic, meaning that something finally scored lower than Balan Wonderworld.
So here I am, nearly a year to the date, and I'm doing another deep dive on the next controversial Square Enix game that came out in the first quarter. That's something to keep this at 2, because I don't want this to be a trend. So you know the game, you've seen the reviews, and you know a little bit of the history. So here is Babylon's Fall for the PlayStation 5. A little game I was kind of excited for, because a multiplayer character action game sounds great. I think we all wanted Devil May Cry 5 to have more multiplayer integration than it did, so the possibility of it being real is something that was exciting. But is that what we got? Let's get into it.
Babylon's Fall is one of the most challenging games I've ever had to write about. I don't mean that in a game difficulty, by the way. I mean, some of the decisions here have left me completely baffled. For starters, there's a little slip on the inside of the case that tells you when you make your account and select a region that you won't be able to play with people from other servers, and you won't ever be able to change it. So let's say you mess up your selection. That's too bad. Seems a little counterintuitive to make your online-only live service game region-locked, but what do I know? Then once in game, before being shown any lore, story, or anything, we're tossed into character creation, where you'll pick a race: Husian, Agavian, and Galaleon. I think that's how they're pronounced, they're not ever said. Does it matter? Very much so, but you only get an asterisk in the corner of the screen that says, this will determine your abilities, read carefully. More on that later. I think right off the bat, you'll notice just how ugly everything is. Now, I'm not usually one to judge a game by its visuals, but Babylon's Fall doesn't look like something that released in 2022 at all. All of the hair and facial options look very early to mid 7th gen and closer to Dark Souls 1 than any of these. I went with Galilian because it said I can debilitate foes, so like presumably a debuff of some sorts. The opening cutscene plays out like such. You're seemingly enlisted by the Neo-Babylonian Empire, and by that I mean enslaved by a bunch of weird magical devices they tossed on your back, one that kills half the people with you. I should probably be dead as well, considering my hair is just clipping straight through my chest. In the narrative, there's a lot of not so subtle references to, well, Babylonia and other ancient Mesopotamian areas. The way your character works and exists in this world isn't so dissimilar to that in the way the slaves were in Babylon. The main difference here is that you're being selected in order to become an explorer of the ziggurat and other areas of Neo-Babylon, aka a sentinel. So yeah, that's what that tweet was about, I guess. As a sentinel, your goal is to climb the video game version of the biblical Tower of Babel, ideally with a group of friends and a zany cast of characters to keep you engaged in the narrative. Along the way, you encounter massive bosses, unlock new types of weapons, dive deep into the mini cloisters of Babylon, and have to sit through this.
Who would have thought anywhere on the ziggurat could be so beautiful?
What am I watching? I realized that Bayonetta has a lot of cutscenes like this, but that game has oodles more style and personality than this. The dialogue is usually really over the top and filled with character moments. Babylon's Fall, on the other hand, has a lot of this.
Alien!
What is going on? I played the entire game. I watched a compilation of all the cutscenes afterwards, and I'm still a little confused as to what's going on. It starts as one thing, turns into another, and then goes LOL, just kidding, like twice, all without any interesting or endearing characters to follow or keep you captivated. The closest you get to characters in a story are Isham and Lady Sophia, who aren't really parts of the narrative so much as like there. The only thing that happens at the beginning is that you're about to die, or according to the monsters in the tower, ascend when time freezes and your coffin, that's the little thing slapped on your back, goes berserk, and a mysterious woman comes down from the sky, instantly striking fear in the hearts of your enemies while allowing you to use weapons from it as well. From here, you clear your initial trial as a sentinel, becoming trusted in society and slowly making your way through the mystery of the ziggurat. One that's totally not spoiled by a crafting drop.
How about the gameplay though? If PlatinumGames is good at anything, it's making really fun combat systems. So let's see what their first attempt at something multiplayer's like.
This may be controversial, but I don't think Babylon's Fall feels that bad. I would honestly say it's actually one of the more engaging combat systems they've ever put into one of their games. So each character you make, you can't erase them by the way, has 4 different slots for weapons. 2 are used as standard attacks, 2 become spectral attacks. You have a separate meter, essentially stamina, under your health. With this, you use the left and right triggers in order to perform totally different combos with those 2 weapons. You can put anything into any one of the 4 slots, by the way, so if you want to have nothing but swords equipped, you can hold down those triggers and let them rip. You can have chargeable spells and bows that do huge amounts of damage. I was always into having quick swords on my face buttons and big ol' hammers and bows on the triggers to have big bouts of damage at a time. Overall, it's a relatively simple system, but it doesn't go out of its way to explain much at all. Does the game tell you any of its combos? No. Does it let you know what a launcher is or how to intertwine 2 weapons together? Not at all. Is there a single tutorial or instance in the game that makes you vaguely aware that you can sit in a turret and shoot dudes with it? If there is, I missed it. I didn't know about this till like 30 hours in. Babylon's reminds me a little of God Hand in its surprising complexity yet easy to use combat systems. That is at first. For some reason, Babylon's Fall decides to drip feed you combat systems all the way through the very end of the game. Like you unlock the actual fun parts after the final boss. It turns out that each style of weapon in each slot has 3 multiple functions: powerful, normal, and technical, each of which feel entirely different. You can turn a basic sword into a heavier combo that'll chain easier into hammer swings. You can get more damage out of your charge attacks. You can even go technical if you want to try to make dollar store Sunhee Legend videos. Speaking of, you remember that big ol' asterisk back in the character creation? So around halfway through the campaign, you unlock that ability. You can level up your Gideon coffins with smaller passives, but you have one major ability, and the default for my class, the one that said debuffs, essentially, is this. Ah yes, That's helpful. Yeah, it's not even the cool whip-in that other races get, but this absurdly weak swing around that never actually helped me out one time. You do have the ability to make another character who shares the campaign progression and inventory, so you can swap it over, but the level progress on your coffin gets erased. Speaking of, where is it? I gain experience for every kill and mission done in this game. It says I'm gaining experience points, it says I level up sometimes, I see the level, but where's the meter? Where's the progress? Why is it all invisible? You'll get points for each invisible level up, and you can put them into passive abilities for each coffin. Helpful, I think. I never really felt a difference in my gameplay with this, and that's probably because of the way gear works. Like most standard live service games in the new 20s, the arbitrary number assigned to a piece of equipment is actually the only thing that matters. You got a good purple or yellow divine weapon? Doesn't matter. Not as good as that green item that's 5 levels higher. Gear scaling in Babylon's Fall sucks, and more on that later, because it's a total mess. But like, the raw gameplay here isn't bad. In fact, I would say it's very close to your standard Platinum fare. It's flashy. It usually feels good to move and dodge around. The boss fights feel as spectacular as anything you'd see from their previous games. In fact, there's brief moments where I would say Babylon's Fall is fun. It's just when those multiplayer aspects creep in that it becomes a complete disaster.
We went into how Babylon's Fall was always supposed to be a multiplayer game, so how exactly is it? It's not like it was Platinum's first attempt at multiplayer, considering they did do Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which, to be fair, was rushed. But how's this? It's not great.
For starters, Babylon's Fall is an online-only title, which means you're not intended to play this alone. In fact, you just can't. There's no way to launch into any type of content without opening a lobby first, and you can't move past the title screen without logging in. Normally, I'd save something like the multiplayer for after the main experience, but it's all woven together. It'll make sure you know at all times too, with the Wi-Fi bars on top. Always. So you make your way through the campaign, which are levels separated by clickable zones in each region or cloister. But each of those levels basically looks exactly the same. So pick a level and wait for someone to join. Or, you know, if no one decides to join after 2 minutes, it'll toss you into a match whether or not you're ready. So, and let's talk about this. This means that in order to partner up with people who are playing the game or trying to help others out via the quick match feature, you have to make sure you make that lobby around the same time they select to join. You can't wait for help for like 10 minutes or so, which, oh god, this game needs. You're expected to get into the zone real fast. For lesser experienced players or those who are going to need a moment to like use the bathroom, too bad, you're going in. Also, for some reason, despite my item level being like exactly right, it seems like all of the bosses are scaled for a party of 4 or at least 2. For instance, I queued up for a story quest, no one to play with of course, so I'm tossed in, watch one of the only actual cutscenes in the game before fighting a big Spider-Woman boss for 16 minutes. Yeah, it's not like a full level, it's one long and tedious boss fight in the same arena. Look how little damage I'm doing to this thing. I managed to do it, it just took a little bit of my soul, and it's a shame that I couldn't wait for any help, but hey, maybe I can help another player out using the quick play feature. Ah, yes. Cannot engage in matchmaking at this time, which means there's not a single player, PlayStation 5 or PC, hosting a lobby, despite this being the second day the game was out and having crossplay. Whew. They have patched this since, letting the lobby sit for a bit longer, but it'll still just auto-launch after a few minutes, solo or not. Quick play is all kinds of messed up too, because you have the ability to play levels that are a much higher item level than you. Instead of limiting the auto matchmaking to things in, you know, your eye level, you might accidentally end up in something that's 20 full levels higher, which means you're gonna go in and do literally 0 damage to enemies. Just hope that it's not one of the boss duels where the entire party shares lives like in Monster Hunter. You like dying in one hit? I don't think I've seen a matchmaking system worse than this. There's no way to browse lobbies and look at quests that are being made, and considering you're held to a specific region, there's a low percentage chance you'll even be able to play with somebody else. Then, for all of the story-related missions, your item level gets scaled down, so all of the progress you're making doesn't even amount to anything. I love it. Now for the best part. Due to the game being multiplayer in the first place, it completely affects the way that combat works. Your normal character action game will give you the ability to like throw dudes around with ease, so you can can zip around, knock them around, and feel all sorts of powerful. Not Babylon. It's very rare that you'll have the ability to knock an enemy off their feet, and most of them will be sitting in place as you combo them, slightly glowing before they attack you so you can dodge. It's got the DNA of a Platinum game, but feels extremely watered down in order to fit the multiplayer live service format, and it suffers hugely from it. I think they could have made this work with more movement abilities, but instead we get a stagger meter. One that if you're just by yourself may not ever go down.
Okay, let's jump forward a bit. You've beaten the game. Babylon's Fall's narrative just kinda happens. It has a few moments where it feels alright, it kind of goes into something that might be interesting, but overall, the presentation just doesn't get there, and you're viewing it through this weird lens of this obfuscated painted art style, if you even want to call it that.
I think I can understand why someone might want to make a game look like a moving painting. One of my favorite examples of something that does this well is Grease. This game is visual perfection, and it works with the entire narrative that they were building. I'm not sure why they wanted to make Babylon's Fall, this Hunger Games-light sci-fi exploitation of gods, look like an oil painting, but they really messed this one up, especially because you can tell it's just a filter over low-textured graphics. And that's not to say it looks awful all the time. There's two specific zones in Babylon's Fall that look nice, the Elysium Cloister and the big garden area. But that's a very small part of the game. You'll be mostly looking at the same few areas over and over while fighting enemies that look more like amorphous blobs than a design. It's also very noticeable in the background. If the painting style wasn't enough, you have to look at this on your back anywhere you go. So with graphics that are already pretty obfuscated by filters and a lack of direction, your screen just looks fuzzy at all times. I don't think I've ever played a game where I had difficulty just focusing on what's on the screen, but here we are. And that's not even going into how awful all the textures look in general. Seriously, this is something made in 2022. Anytime you slap on a new piece of armor, sometimes it doesn't look like it was made for your character model or even this world. I made a cute girl, and apparently this is supposed to be a rabbit tail on the chest. What? Unless you use a paid vanity glam, which still don't look great, there's a 99% chance your character's base armor is gonna look ridiculous and laughable. Well, it turns out a lot of the models for armor are straight ripped from Final Fantasy XIV. That's fine, I guess. They were given permission, and that game has a million pieces of gear that aren't being used anywhere else. You just might want to change the name so it doesn't say the coat of maiming, the exact item style from 14. There's an infinite amount of awful looking gear and things in this game I could look at, so let's just move on to the story. So early on, as in right in the beginning, you get that Gideon coffin slapped on your back, and you have a voice that speaks to you through it. Well, that was a character named Arwia, and okay, to be honest, I had a really hard time understanding exactly what was going on in the story due to the sheer amount of screenshot cutscenes with endless dialogue about nothing with uninteresting characters. I think there's something to be said for that by itself, but basically there's a soul inside the coffin, which when you get to the top, releases itself and prevents you from being ascended, see, dying, and it stops the spacey Tower Elysium from falling and crushing Babylon by sacrificing herself. I think? The whole plot is something about magic and gods being BS, and all of it being a funky science experiment. Bill Nye would be proud. Well, after she does so, you no longer have a coffin voice, which was the thing that talks to you in missions. That is, unless microtransactions. Ziggurat is a paid currency used for mostly cosmetic items. So now, anytime you go into a mission, there's not a single voice talking to you, and any personality that Babylon had is straight up yoinked out underneath you, and you're left with the sound of silence. Well, and the music by Hiroshi Yamaguchi, who rocks and is easily the best part of this game, but still. They take something the player had since the beginning of the game and lock it behind a paid currency. You can't get it back unless you spend real money. Up until this point, you're slowly unlocking more and more game mechanics, and the game is starting to resemble something decent that could be easily fixed with a few tweaks before it's yoink, and now you gotta pay for this thing, which is one of two generic voices.
It's a pleasure to be of your service. My name is Priska.
From here, you're presented with the Endgame, and for me, that platinum trophy and number grind. And you know what that means.
Babylon's Fall.
We gotta talk about roadmaps. These days, modern games like to trickle out content over time, and Babylon's Fall is no different. But this being a Square Enix project means we get something like a Nier collaboration, so let's see what it's got.
When you finish Babylons, you're given a few mission types to do: sieges and skirmishes. Skirmishes are retreads through the previous levels with a slowly increasing item level and a few random conditions here and there. Some levels are shrouded in darkness, some have weird poison fields where you have to carry an orb through, like Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles. This is really awesome when you can't find someone to play with and you have to drop it on the ground in order to use your spectral attacks to do any damage, but the boss keeps blowing you away, causing you to be stuck in the poison field and die, while also summoning enemies that shoot lasers everywhere and you can't find a single person to play with. There's a lot of things like this, and each time you finish a level you get a random set of items to equip that may or may not be better than what you have. So different rarities, different item levels for 8 different item slots, and you got yourself a recipe for RNG. You want good loot? Better start praying. Or just run Siege, a shorter game mode with the same item dropping tendencies. Seriously, you could just spam the level 60 thing and gear up to like 120 no problem. Yeah, the 20 people playing this game already gamed the system. You can go further, but that requires crafting, which requires you to grind to the same levels and participate in duels, which are just arenas for boss fights that you already did in the story. Again, good luck playing this with anyone. If your gear loadout isn't quite what you need for one of these, you'll just continue dying, so yeah, keep spamming the siege. Isn't this exciting? On top of that, you have your season pass. This is very standard. Unlock cosmetics and items by doing missions that give you battle points, some of which are daily and weekly. It's the concept of an end game in the most basic of fashions, and it really shows that when putting this together, they just copied other and more successful games' homework. Anyways, I grinded for the Platinum Trophy, I got my character into the mid 120s, and did the final stretch, which was, for some reason, enhancing 3 different items with crafting. Yeah, I had nearly every mission done in the game before I successfully enchanted a few pieces of gear. Finally, about 40 hours of spamming the same levels over and over, grinding for materials, getting the platy, and staring at my screen with zero emotion on my face, I turned off Babylon's Fall and gave up. Sure, there was more content coming, but I couldn't do it anymore.
This is the first time I beat a game for this channel that put me off of gaming so much that I actually didn't touch anything for like a week. I went outside, I touched grass, I just needed to get away from LEDs for a bit, you know? I don't know who out there has been actually sitting there and getting their dailies done every single day, but props to you. Anyways, I think a lot of the story regarding Babylon's narrative is inaccurate. And I don't mean the story, I mean like what is happening and what type of game it is. There's people out there that think it's a pay-to-win thing, and it is definitely not that. The perception of what exactly Babylon's is, what it set out to do, it's there. The developers did a bunch of interviews on it, but I feel like it's getting obfuscated by, you know,
the internet.
A lot of people tend to think anytime something goes bad with a game like this that it's the big bad publisher's fault, but in this case, I don't know about that.
There's a common misconception that Babylon's Fall was turned into a live service multiplayer game mid-development. Well, like we found out earlier, that wasn't the case. Babylon's Fall, like Scalebound, was always intended to be a big multiplayer experience. In this case, one that was given around 4 years of development time, with Metal Gear Rising director Kenji Saito heading it the entire time. How Platinum and Square put out something that, excuse my bluntness, really freaking sucks is baffling. This is easily the worst game that both of these companies have put out in a very long time, and I just don't know how they messed it up. Then I remember Scalebound. It's easy to sit here and try to point the finger at Microsoft or Square for this, but there were a few interviews that came out in the last few years that got deeper into the story. There was one with the YouTube channel Cutscenes in 2021 where Hideki Kamiya straight up stated that we weren't experienced enough and couldn't get over that wall, and that they were sorry to Microsoft who had placed their trust in us as a business partner. The crew at Platinum has said they lacked experience with online games and couldn't make it work up to their standards. I can't help but feel like Babylon's Fall was their attempt to try it again. PlatinumGames had been tasked with a live service multiplayer heavy game in the past, failed, and wanted a second chance. Unfortunately, despite many delays taking Babylon's from 2019 to 2022, it seems like this type of game is just above their capabilities. I think a lot of people in their core audience, and even the mainstream, would have been more forgiving of a lot of these aspects if the game functioned like your typical Platinum title, but the visual style didn't help with that one. It makes me think that Platinum is stuck in the 7th generation of games, the PlayStation 3. They are more than capable of putting out excellent video games, as we all know, but I don't think they've released anything truly 8th or 9th gen. A lot of their recent things are awesome, but they are strictly single-player experiences. They don't really push the boundaries or scream 2022.
But in the interest of, being thorough and getting the full story, I wanted to follow everything with Babylon's Fall for at least a month, play as much of Season 1 that I could, and look into the future, and unfortunately, things don't look so good.
Right before I'd stopped playing initially, Square Enix had put out a campaign as a call to action for all Sentinels. Help new recruits get through story missions with a quick play function, and if at least 20,000 of these were done, you'd get 5 crafting seals and 1 relic weapon. That would be neat if I didn't see this and immediately play a random mission where I got 2 yellow relics. This completed apparently, but there wasn't a counter or anything. Shortly after this, a bunch of weird articles and surveys started coming out of the developer camp. They released this one that focused mostly on player satisfaction with the graphics. Like, maybe we'll alter the graphics? I feel like this is something that should have been addressed a bit sooner than after the game launched. Let's talk about player numbers, by the way. Babylon's Fall came out on the exact same day as Elden Ring, so there was already gonna be an issue. But almost right out of the gate, there were news articles pointing out the fact that on Steam, the highest concurrent player count was around 1,000. Granted, this also came out on the PlayStation 5 as well, and a majority of anyone I'd run to was on the console, but that was not a good sign to start with. Well, to combat this, they decided to release a demo to try and garner player interest, one that peaked at 46 players all time. Ouch. Nowadays, Babylon's Fall usually tops at around 100 concurrent daily players on Steam. Keep in mind that's 100 people who may or may not be region and level locked out of other players. For a live service game that, wants to have people playing it, that's a death sentence. Granted, it's higher than Balan Wonderworld, but that's not saying much. So, patch content. The first big update on the 22nd of March introduced a new faction of people, a new type of weapon, a new way to enhance your weapons, a very small amount of additional story, and some rotating dailies and bosses. So quite literally a little more of the exact same. The new blockades mode they released feels nearly identical to Siege and Skirmish because they're all in the same few levels that you run through over and over. Seriously, there's only 6 different biomes here and there's a dumb amount of missions in this game, but they all feel exactly the same. That was until March 29th, the Nier Automata event. Surely, if anything, this would give us some neat Nier lore and provide a unique experience to Babylon's Fall. It's exactly the same. The Nier collab is closer to downloading mods on Steam Workshop than it is a collaboration. There's next to no dialogue for the existence of the Nier stuff. There's no voiceover for your coffin to explain what's going on. It's just suddenly enemy and boss types that already existed have a meal head. Similarly to them ripping armor from Final Fantasy XIV, this is like they had some assets laying around and they just tossed them into the engine. Let's just make the lobby area a little less saturated, put on Become as Gods, and call it a day. There's a few Nier outfits you can grind for, including the 14 one, but if you wanted the 2B or 9S gear, you had to you had to fork over around $20 for each. So I don't know what to say. Also, that Poison Field boss fight I described, that was in this event. Yeah, that probably explains why on the second day after the second half of the collaboration launched, that Babylon's Fall had 10 concurrent players on Steam. I had thought about waiting for the final part of Season 1 to launch to see what the future holds for Babylon's Fall, but I think I'm good. I think I can firmly say I beat, in quotations, this, and that's that.
So, what's next? Well, Square Enix and Platinum put out an article about a month after the game out saying that the game is continuing development, which is a little alarming. They said that Season 2 is almost done, Season 3 is being worked on right now, and they have plans for the future. Considering even the Reddit fanbase for Babylon's Fall is disinterested, I couldn't tell you what's gonna happen.
It's sad when on the day of new events, I can only find 2 other players in the entire North American lobby. Babylon's Fall could have been something really neat, but I think PlatinumGames were really showing their own limitations as a developer with this one, and I think that's what makes me the saddest. That's my company, they're the underdogs. I've been excited for Platinum ever since their early formation and even Clover Studio. But this is a big letdown, not just as a Square Enix fan, but a Platinum one as well. On paper, Babylon's Fall sounds neat. It's a game about unveiling the mystery of a horrendous scientific experiment on a group of unsuspecting people. It's a game that mirrors the burden of biblical tales and even teeters into the classic man versus God trope. It's an extremely unique looking game with an art style you don't see much, if at all. But when I think about how this is a PlayStation 5 game, I'm in awe. There are PS4, PS3, and heck, other Platinum titles that look better than this, but comparing it against yourself is what matters. Metal Gear Rising is 9 years older and looks better in just about every aspect. I am all for an underdog story story, and I would love for Babylon's Fall to get the No Man's Sky treatment. I would love for this game to slowly fix itself over time and become one of the coolest character action games on the market. But unfortunately, I see this going more the direction of Anthem. What this means for PlatinumGames as a developer, I'm not sure. But here's hoping that Bayonetta 3 knocks it into another dimension, because they need a big hit ASAP.
And well, that's the story of Babylon's Fall. At least for now. I had considered dragging this one out a tiny bit more, but I feel like I'm just getting diminishing returns on the content they're adding, which unfortunately is more and more underwhelming. This is the first time I've done one of these deep dives and come out with a completely negative outlook on things, which is really unfortunate because I do think that there is something there. I don't personally think so because I, play gutter trash, but this game's probably going to end up being on a lot of the worst games of the year lists for 2022, and that's unfortunate. I don't want PlatinumGames to be in that position. Anyways, I think I've gotten about as much out of this as I can, so I guess the moral of the story is know your limits. We're not all Keithley. Anyways, I've been Austin, and you guys probably saw the poll that I put out where I asked what types of games you would want me to do on this, and as you might know, I'm going to be diving into Metal Gear Survive sometime soon, but I do want to know what other games y'all would like to see me do a deep dive on, so let me know down in the comments below if there's something you think I should take a look at. I'm gonna head out for now. Catch me next time when... let's do some more clones, huh?
Thank you all so much for watching. Special Patreon shout out to Blackfoot Ferret, Chris Shelton, Christopher Olivia, Darren Newton, Doug Prince, DX Buster, David Molnar, Elijah, GM Pinks, Hey Quiggles, Jay Roos, Jacoby Fitzpatrick, Kevin Zanowski, Kieran Arter, Nick Irving, P Funk, Randall Bentley, Ryan Talbert, and Shazan. Thank you all so much for your generous support. I told you all this would be worth it. I didn't think it was gonna be like 35 minutes, but geez, this is one of my favorite and least favorite videos I've ever done. I feel like there's a story here, and it's probably still opening up over time, but this is as much as I can do for now. Maybe we'll see a sequel in the future, but who knows. Anyways, I have been working for so long that I'm just gonna go straight to sleep. I will see you guys soon. Much sooner this time. Love you, bye.